You ever feel like you're all alone? Like nobody gets you, or worse, even wants to get you? See, I know what that feels like. My freshman year of high school was a traumatic year for me. I was kind of a late bloomer. Everybody else was taller, better looking, and I didn't feel like I had any place where I fit. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And I had a lot of tears that year. Became very familiar with loneliness. By my 10th grade year, I'd gotten my height. I grew up. I was as tall as everybody else. They were still better looking, but you take what you can get, It's like you got to work with what you got. So, but I was already pretty familiar with this concept of loneliness and feeling disconnected. And it was quite a while before I started to realize that I wasn't alone in my loneliness. That most people experience loneliness at some point in time. That feeling of being disconnected, it's kind of crazy. 7.5 billion of us on this planet, and we can feel alone and disconnected. It's less crazy when you consider the fact that having community, which is the point of this talk, having community is not about being in proximity to others, but it's about forming deep and meaningful connection with others. It's something that we're driven toward. We want it just deep within our soul. We see Tom Hanks is so desperate for friendship when stranded on an island, he decides to make a buddy out of a volleyball, right? Calls him Wilson and gets his relationship. Will Smith thinks he's the only guy left alive in the world, and he gets an intimate relationship with his dog. In fact, millions of us, we have dogs as pets, right? Because we want that unconditional love that they get. Now, scientists are still baffled as to why people have cats. They assume it's got something to do with a need to be disdained every once in a while, but I'm just kidding about the cats. Don't fill up my box with hate mail or kitty videos. I don't need that stuff. But I'm serious about our drive for connection, for community, that we need to have it. In fact, the best version of you cannot be found in isolation. It can only be found in the context of community. Let me show you what I mean. Draft horses are the kind of a work horse. They're the work critter of the farm. They are very strong. And if you take a good draft horse that's nice and healthy, he can probably pull about 8,000 pounds, which is impressive, isn't it? That's like 4 tons. He can just pull it. So we got Billy here pulling 8,000. We're going to use his brother, who also can pull 8,000 pounds. And so they got some strong horses. So it makes sense, right? We put these horses together. If we were to yoke them so that they're pulling in the same direction, well, they ought to be able to pull like 16,000 pounds, right? That just makes sense, but they don't. Instead, what they do is they pull 24,000 pounds. Each of them contributes 50% more than what they were able to do on their own. And that's the power of community, is that there's something about the synergy that happens when we connect together in teams, that we are able to do more connected than we are able to do alone. And we know that 2 heads are better than 1, right? We've got that expression. But what we don't think about is 1 head is better than 1 when it's in the context of community. So that's what we see going on here, and the fact that it's so powerful, it's so important. And I want to take this talk to explain to you how you can have community that makes you more of who you already are. But to do that, I've first got to explain to you what I mean by community. Because when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about a dynamic group of individuals who have a shared purpose, a shared fate, and a shared affection. Now, the purpose is usually what is the initial thing that brings a community together. There's an ideal, a plan, something that we're going to move toward. It's going to be that we're going to have education that is empowering, that's moving us along. We're going to have leadership that's meaningful and significant. We have this idea, and then we get other people that share that idea, that purpose. It's bigger than us. It's more than us. And we get together. And as we work toward that, we end up sharing a fate because we're committed to that point. And if it doesn't happen, we're all losers. And when it does happen, we're all winners. We see that, we're hearing about the elections, that we're sharing a fate in this room. And so in a sense, we're all looking towards one thing. But what really sets apart communities from just being a group is the affection, is the love that grows. between people, that connection that allows us to not just be after this purpose. Like if you're getting together and your purpose is to build a playground at the end of the road, and you get the other neighbors and they say, hey, we want to do this too, and they're going to share this because either we're going to get that playground made or our kids are going to drive us crazy at home. We share a fate here. But then you get the playground made and now suddenly you're having dinner with Bob and Sally next door, who you didn't know before the playground, but affection has grown and you start to build a community. Because now that we've done the playground, well, let's see what else we can do to improve our community. So the purpose is still there, but now there's a new thing happening of community where we're pulled together. To understand this better, I want us to look at murmurations. If you're not familiar with that term, a murmuration is what starlings do when they get together. But we're going to try to have you look at that because these are murmurations. The European starlings, they form these beautiful things. And as you can see, it's just a wonder to behold, isn't it? It's just a beautiful thing to watch them. So much so that scientists from virtually every branch of science has come to study these murmurations and say, why do starlings do this? Why do they form these things? And how do they do this? Well, as they're trying to understand that, they look at the how, and one of the things they study is reaction time. See, the average person has a reaction time of about 270 milliseconds, which is pretty quick. It's just over a quarter of a second. It's not too bad. The average starling, when put into a laboratory and studied for its reaction time, is about 76 milliseconds. That's pretty fast. And you can see with that difference how quickly, and it's necessary, because when they're flying so close together, that they have to make sure that they can react very quickly, because the communication necessary to form these things, see how they move it as though it's one object there in the air. And yet, there can be thousands, even a million birds that will be together in a flock. So how do they communicate across such a large thing to make these beautiful things? Well, they don't. They don't watch the whole thing. What they do is they pay attention to the 7 birds that are the closest to them, which is a fascinating thing because we've got now the modern photography and ways that they can do this so they can study the birds while flying. And they also find out, not unlike our draft horses, reaction time gets quicker. It gets down to about 100th of a second, 10 milliseconds. So they're faster, more reactive when they're flying together than when they're in the laboratory being studied. They form these beautiful formations because they are able to watch just the 7 right around them. And those 7, just like in this room, the tables are all set up with 7 things at each table. I marveled at that when I came in. But if you look at the 7 that are closest to you, the 7 that are closest to the person next to you might be a different 7. There'll be some overlap, but it covers the entire flock. So as my flock here today, you'd all be covered in groups of 7. And with reaction time at 100th of a second, they're able to move together and make beautiful things out of a murmuration. So they have the shared purpose. Because we looked at why do they do this? The assumption that the scientists have, now you talk to a bird watcher, they're saying they do it for the sheer joy of it. Because if you listen to them, it's noisy and they have a lot of talking going on. But scientists will tell us they do this for safety because it confuses predators, it keeps them together, and they're able to react as a group instead of as an individual, which keeps them safer. So they have a shared purpose, and of course, they've got a shared fate because it's life or death for them. Because once that predator picks you off, your fate is finished. And they understand that we are all in this together. Every one of us is vulnerable. We don't know a whole lot about the affection of starlings. That's not something we've really studied, but there's an awful lot of them, so we figure somebody's getting busy, so we don't really know what's going on there, but there's a lot of the birds there, so there's some affection happening someplace, all right? And then, so we had that going on. What we do know is that they're not around the same 7 the entire time they're flying. It's dynamic, it changes. They move throughout it because they get on the edge where it's more dangerous and they move to the middle where it's safer, and everybody takes a turn because they're all in it together. So a starling doesn't fly up to the branches and say to the other starlings that are there, hey you guys, the word is there's about to be a murmuration in 5 minutes. Why don't the 7 of you stay right around me and we'll fly together the whole time. We'll stay as a bunch and it'll be a lot more fun that way. See, that's not community. That's a clique. That decides that the safety of the group and that purpose isn't important, because cliques destroy purpose. They destroy affection. And so it focuses then in on about me, what about me? And that's not community. You don't get community focused in. Community only happens when you focus out. So that's one of the things that we look at. But to understand how this works a little bit more and to give you some better ideas, I want us to look at it from a perspective of a salad. There we are. Because if you have a tossed salad, you know, I like salad. I think that it's a great thing to do. You forget about the iceberg. You know, you get some romaine or maybe a little bit of kale. All the cool kids are eating kale today, so let's get some kale in there. Some, you know, cut up some tomatoes, some cucumbers. Got to have some onions in there, sliced nice and thin to go on there. Maybe some olives. Make sure they're Kalamata. Those are the best. And you get them out. Imagine getting your salad all ready, and you got all the bowls with all your ingredients, and you're getting ready for your salad, and you sit down and you eat your bowl of onions, and you eat your bowl of peppers. That would just be kind of weird, wouldn't it? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, it might taste okay, especially if you like those ingredients, but it's not really a salad. See, the vegetables have failed to meet their potential because they have remained isolated. And we do this when we try to make community and keep segregated. See, this is the kind of community that is plagued by the isms, the sexism, the racism, the classism, where the whole focus is on who do we keep out, how do we keep ourselves separate and secure. It's not about the blending, but it's about the separation. And community does not happen well like that. So we get those salad, and we know that's not how you make a salad. We take all those bowls, we dump them together into one big bowl, and we toss it up, and we look at all those veggies kind of snuggling with each other and making a beautiful salad. And then we reach over, grab ranch dressing, and just start pouring it on, you know? And now our Kalamata olives, they taste like ranch dressing, you know? And that healthy kale tastes like ranch dressing. And those tomatoes taste like ranch dressing. Right? And we see this a lot as we try to form community, and we see this in institutions largely, right? What happens if you go to the military? We're going to cut all your hair off, we're going to tell you when to stand, sit, get dressed, and how, and we want uniformity. We don't want individualism. What happens if we want to go to school? You're going to sit in your seat and you're going to pay attention. What happens when we go to church, right? Well, we start to do these things where we make it that the individual is not really valued. The institution is what is important. That the community doesn't really need you, but you're going to be a part of this, and you're all welcome. You can all jump in the bowl, but once you're in the bowl, we're going to cover you with ranch dressing to make sure that you're just like everybody else. You know, you can't be unique, you can't be different. You're going to be just like everybody else. Well, that's not really a good way to eat a salad, plus the nutritionists tell us it's not even healthy. So what we do is we get all those ingredients together, we put them in a bowl, we toss them, and we get a little salt and pepper because we want to season it a little bit. And then we take a little oil, a little vinegar, put it on there, something that's going to accentuate the individual flavors. We toss it together, and now the flavors react to each other. They play off one another. And so the individual contributions of each vegetable are accentuated. They're separated and made to bring to their fullest without taking away from the overall salad experience. And so we don't throw something like a ton of ranch dressing on because it takes away from salad and the individualness, the liveliness of all those individual flavors. And see, when you're having good community, you're going to have something that brings in all the differences and still maintains a purpose and still has a focus and an affection that grows. See, I have a community that I'm a part of, and we decided that that community is something that's way too good to be kept to itself. That's the nature of community. You want to share it. And so what we do is we bought a coffee shop downtown Main Street, Newark. And we have it, the whole point is, I'm not a coffee drinker, but we have it so we can have community. And it doesn't take much. You can make community right where you are. Just with a few points, you don't have to have advanced degrees or anything like that. You can develop it on your own because first off, you got to focus on bigger than yourself. If you're focusing on yourself, you're not going to have community, you're going to have a clique, and it's always going to be bad. Even the people in the clique end up with a tough time. You invite others to share your vision, and you accept whoever comes. Always have an open seat. Don't get to the point, say, oh, we've got enough, let's close it down. You know, the best part of the group may not even join yet. And so you want to have an open seat that's always available. You celebrate the differences that don't hamper the purpose, because there's unique contributions that everyone can bring. And as you do this, you just watch as the affection grows as you pull together in one direction. It'll change your life.